What was supposed to be a night of nostalgia and second chances turned into a nightmare no one saw coming. When a husband reconnects with his high school sweetheart at their 40th reunion, buried secrets resurface, and by morning he's missing, his wedding ring left behind, and blood found in his abandoned car. As detectives race to uncover the truth, they realize this wasn't just an affair. It was an obsession spiraling out of control. On the evening of September 10th, 2023, the Golden Oaks High School class of 1983 gathered at a luxurious banquet hall to celebrate their 40th class reunion. It was a festive event filled with nostalgia, laughter, and memories, until whispers of scandal began to surface among the attendees. Jack Carter, a well-known businessman in the community, arrived at the reunion with his wife, Susan Carter. The couple had been married for over 30 years, and their life seemed perfect to outsiders. They had raised 2 children, built a thriving business, and were known as a pillar of their suburban neighborhood. However, Susan had noticed something unsettling in Jack's behavior leading up to the event. He had been distant, secretive even, taking calls in hushed tones and frequently texting someone throughout the day. When Susan asked, Jack brushed it off, blaming work stress. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. It wasn't just Jack's evasiveness. It was the excitement in his voice whenever he talked about the reunion, a spark she hadn't heard in years. As the night progressed, Jack seemed unusually animated, moving through the crowd, reconnecting with old friends. But Susan's heart sank when she saw Jack gravitate toward Amanda Collins, his high school sweetheart. Amanda was as charming as ever, with a radiant smile and an air of confidence that suggested she knew exactly how to draw Jack's attention. Susan watched from across the room as Jack and Amanda slipped into a comfortable rhythm of conversation, laughing as if no time had passed between them. The subtle touches, the shared glances. It was all too familiar. Susan clenched her glass, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. The night dragged on, and Susan tried to stay composed, mingling with other guests. But the sight of her husband reminiscing with Amanda stirred emotions she hadn't felt in years. Fear, betrayal, and a creeping sense of inadequacy. She excused herself early, hoping Jack would follow her home. But he stayed, lost in conversation with Amanda, seemingly unaware of Susan's departure. The following morning, Susan awoke to an empty bed. Jack hadn't returned home. At first, she tried to convince herself that he must have stayed late at the reunion and decided to sleep at a friend's place. But as the morning stretched into afternoon with no word from him, Susan's unease grew into panic. She called Jack's phone multiple times, but it went straight to voicemail. Desperate, she began calling their close friends and business associates, but no one had seen or heard from him since the reunion. Susan tried Amanda's number as well, but the call went unanswered. Hours passed, and by evening, Susan was overwhelmed with dread. She drove to the reunion venue, hoping to find some clue about where Jack might have gone. The staff remembered seeing Jack leave late, but no one recalled where he went. Some thought they had seen him talking with Amanda in the parking lot, but no one could confirm if they left together. Back at home, Susan sat in the living room, clutching her phone, unsure of what to do next. Then a knock at the door startled her. It was a police officer responding to a missing persons report filed earlier by one of Jack's business associates, who had been trying to reach him about an urgent financial matter. Detective David Harper and his partner, Sarah Miller, arrived soon after, ready to investigate Jack's sudden disappearance. Susan recounted everything: the reunion, Jack's odd behavior, and his closeness with Amanda. The detectives took detailed notes, asking probing questions about Jack's life, his recent behavior, and any possible conflicts. Susan hesitated for a moment, then mentioned the suspicious calls and texts Jack had been receiving recently. "I don't know who he was talking to," she admitted, "but I know it wasn't just about work." Detective Harper exchanged a glance with Miller. They had handled enough cases to recognize when someone was hiding something, and Susan's unease suggested there was more to the story. The investigation began with a focus on Jack's whereabouts, but the detectives knew from experience that disappearances often had roots in personal secrets. Susan could feel the weight of their suspicions, and for the first time, she began to wonder if Jack's behavior had been leading up to something far more dangerous than just an affair. Detective Harper sat across from Susan in the Carters' dimly lit living room, a notebook open on his lap. The ticking clock on the mantel was the only sound, adding weight to the silence. Harper leaned forward, his voice steady but probing. "Mrs. Carter, did your husband mention anything about meeting Amanda Collins before the reunion? Anything unusual between them?" Susan shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "He talked about her a few times, said it would be fun to catch up. But I didn't think." Her voice faltered, as if admitting the truth out loud would make it real. "I didn't think it was serious." Harper nodded slowly, studying her reaction. "And the messages he was getting? Do you remember anything specific about them?" Susan looked away, her gaze fixed on a family photo hanging on the wall. A smiling Jack, arms wrapped around her and their children. "I never saw the messages," she whispered. "But he was hiding something. I just know it." Detective Miller, standing by the window, spoke up. "Mrs. Carter, we need to ask. Do you think your husband might have left with Amanda last night? Could he have chosen to be with her?" The question hit Susan like a blow. She had wrestled with the thought all morning, but hearing it voiced made it feel unbearable. She closed her eyes briefly, as if trying to ward off the pain. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't want to believe it, but I can't say for sure." Harper scribbled something in his notebook before standing up. "We'll need to speak with Amanda," he said gently, "and we'll be reviewing Jack's phone records. This might take some time, but we'll get to the bottom of it." As the detectives left, Susan felt a strange numbness settle over her, a void where certainty used to be. Part of her wanted to believe that Jack was simply caught up in a foolish mistake, that he would come back and apologize. But another part of her knew better. Something darker was at play. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quiet street. Susan sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old text messages from Jack, hoping to find some clue, a detail she might have missed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ring of her phone. She answered it with trembling hands. "Mrs. Carter, this is Detective Harper." His voice was calm but carried a sense of urgency. "We've spoken to Amanda Collins." Susan's heart pounded in her chest. "What did she say?" "She claims Jack left the reunion alone," Harper replied. "But here's where it gets interesting. Amanda says Jack told her something right before he left. He said he was done hiding and that he was going to tell you everything." Susan's breath caught in her throat. "Tell me everything," she repeated. "We don't know what he meant yet," Harper continued, "but it seems like whatever Jack was hiding, last night was supposed to be the moment he came clean." Susan's mind raced. What had Jack been planning to confess? Was it just the affair, or was there something more? She tried to make sense of it all, but the pieces refused to fit together. "And one more thing," Harper added. "We pulled footage from the parking lot cameras at the reunion. Jack's car was still there this morning." Susan felt a chill run down her spine. "So where is he now?" she whispered. Harper's voice turned grim. "That's what we need to find out." The next morning, Susan was awakened by the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Her head throbbed from a restless night filled with unanswered questions. It was Detective Harper. "Susan, I need you to meet us at the station." Harper's voice was firm. "We found something. It might change things." The words sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She threw on a coat and drove to the police station, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Every worst-case scenario flooded her mind. Jack hurt, Jack running away, Jack never coming back. When Susan arrived, Harper and Miller were waiting in the interrogation room with grim expressions. Harper gestured for her to sit, then slid a small plastic evidence bag across the table. Inside was Jack's wedding band. Susan gasped, her fingers trembling as she picked up the bag. "Where did you find this?" Miller leaned forward. "It was left on the passenger seat of Amanda Collins' car. She claims she didn't know it was there, but we're having trouble believing her story." Susan stared at the ring, her chest tightening. "He never took this off," she whispered. "Not in 30 years. Harper nodded. "That's what concerned us too. It looks like Jack left it behind deliberately. Maybe as a message, maybe not." Miller interjected, her voice low. Amanda insists Jack was upset when he left the reunion, but she swears they didn't leave together. She claims he must have put the ring in her car as some kind of goodbye. But something isn't adding up. Susan's mind reeled. If Jack had left the reunion upset and alone, where would he have gone? And why leave the ring with Amanda? Harper cleared his throat. We've also retrieved Jack's recent phone records, he said, sliding a folder across the table. There are multiple calls and texts between him and Amanda in the days leading up to the reunion. It looks like they were in contact more than you knew. Susan clenched her fists, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. So it was more than just a reunion flirtation, she muttered. Miller gave her a sympathetic glance. We're still trying to figure out exactly what kind of relationship they had, but it's clear this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. Harper leaned back, his eyes narrowing. There's one more thing. Jack withdrew $20,000 from his business account 2 days before the reunion. We're still trying to trace where the money went. Susan's breath hitched. $20,000? Correct, Harper confirmed. That's not pocket change. It could mean Jack was planning something, maybe to run away, maybe something else. Susan felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Jack's behavior, the secrecy, the reunion, it was all leading towards something far more complicated than she had imagined. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was far more alarming than she had feared. Harper closed his notebook and stood. We need to speak with Amanda again, but if you remember anything at all, that might help us understand Jack's plan, you need to tell us. Susan nodded, though her mind was still spinning. As Harper and Miller escorted her out of the station, she felt the crushing weight of realization. Whatever Jack had been planning, he wasn't coming back the same. Or maybe, just maybe, he wasn't coming back at all. That evening, Susan sat alone in her kitchen, the wedding band placed carefully on the table in front of her. It shimmered under the dim light, a cruel reminder of everything she thought her marriage had been. The silence in the house was deafening, amplifying her sense of dread. Where was Jack, and what did he plan to confess that night? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp chime of her phone. It was Detective Harper again. We found something new, he said. His tone was grim, sending a chill down Susan's spine. We need you to come down to the station. Susan rushed out, her heart pounding in her chest. When she arrived at the station, Harper and Miller were waiting, their faces more serious than before. Harper held up a printed photograph. This was captured from security footage at a gas station not far from the reunion venue, around 2 a.m., Harper explained, passing the photo to Susan. Her hands shook as she took the photo. In it, she saw Jack's car parked at the gas station, and standing beside the car was Amanda Collins, her face illuminated by the station's harsh fluorescent lights. What is this? Susan whispered. Amanda said Jack left alone. That's what she told us, Miller replied. But the footage tells a different story. They were together at the gas station just hours after the reunion ended. Susan's heart sank. The lies were unraveling faster than she could keep up. We checked Amanda's financial records, Harper continued. Turns out she received a wire transfer of $15,000 the day after Jack made his $20,000 withdrawal. We think it's connected. Susan's head spun. So he gave her the money? But why? That's what we're trying to figure out, Miller said. Right now, the most likely explanation is that Jack planned to run away with Amanda. But something went wrong. Susan clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her confusion. So where is he now? That's the million-dollar question, Harper muttered. Amanda insists she left Jack at the gas station and went home. She's sticking to that story, even though the footage proves she was with him. Miller leaned closer, her eyes sharp. We're working on the assumption that whatever happened between Jack and Amanda that night, it didn't end well. Susan's breath quickened as panic set in. You think something happened to Jack? Harper hesitated before responding, choosing his words carefully. We believe Amanda knows more than she's letting on, and until we get the full story, we have to consider every possibility. Susan slumped in her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The betrayal was no longer just an emotional blow. It was spiraling into something far more dangerous. What had started as a reunion flirtation had now become a tangled web of deceit, lies, and possibly worse. Unable to sleep, Susan sat on the couch, clutching a blanket around her shoulders as the events of the past days swirled in her mind. She tried to make sense of Jack's actions. The hidden messages, the money, Amanda's involvement. None of it added up. As she scrolled through Jack's old text messages, a thought struck her. She opened their shared cloud storage, something she rarely used, and began browsing through Jack's files. Her heart raced when she stumbled upon a folder marked 1983. It was a collection of old high school photos, scanned letters, and mementos from Jack's teenage years. At the bottom of the folder, one file caught her eye. It was a scanned letter addressed to Jack, from Amanda. The timestamp on the scan showed it had been uploaded just 2 weeks ago. With trembling hands, Susan opened the letter. The contents made her blood run cold. In the letter, Amanda wrote about rekindling old feelings and planning a future together. But there was something more sinister in her words, a veiled threat. "This time, don't leave me behind," the letter read. "You owe me, Jack, and if you try to walk away again, I'll make sure Susan knows everything." Susan stared at the letter, her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't just a romantic reunion. Amanda had been blackmailing Jack, and now Jack was missing. With shaking hands, she dialed Harper's number. When he answered, she whispered, "You need to see this. I think Amanda's been blackmailing Jack, and I think something went terribly wrong." Harper's voice was sharp. "We'll be right over." Detectives Harper and Miller arrived at Susan's house within minutes, their faces grave as they examined the scanned letter. The room was thick with tension, and Susan's mind buzzed with fear. Harper folded the letter and slid it into an evidence folder. "This changes everything," Harper murmured. "If Amanda was blackmailing Jack, she had leverage, and maybe a motive." Miller glanced at Susan. "We need to bring Amanda in for questioning again. This time, we won't take her word at face value." Amanda sat across from Harper and Miller, her polished exterior starting to crack under the weight of suspicion. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "We found the letter," Harper began, sliding a copy of the scanned letter across the table. "Care to explain what this is?" Amanda's face turned pale as she stared at the document. "It's just something from the past. I didn't mean anything by it." Miller leaned forward, her eyes locked on Amanda's. "You didn't mean anything by threatening Jack to leave his wife and run away with you?" Amanda fidgeted, avoiding Miller's gaze. "It wasn't serious. It was just emotional. I wasn't trying to blackmail him." Harper's voice was cold and steady. "And the $15,000 he transferred to your account? Was that just emotional too?" Amanda's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She realized the web of lies was closing in on her. "Jack, he was going to leave Susan," she whispered. "We talked about it, but he backed out last minute. I was angry, yes, but I didn't hurt him." Harper's expression darkened. "We have footage of you with Jack at the gas station around 2 a.m. What happened after that?" Amanda swallowed hard, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "We fought. He told me he couldn't leave Susan after all. I got upset. I slapped him." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "He told me he was done and drove off. That's the last time I saw him." Miller exchanged a glance with Harper. "If that's true, then why did he leave his wedding ring in your car?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. He must have put it there when I wasn't looking. I thought it was his way of saying goodbye." Harper studied her, his face unreadable. "Amanda, if you're lying, now's the time to come clean, because if we find out later that you were involved in his disappearance, it's going to be a lot worse for you." Amanda shook her head frantically. "I didn't do anything to him. I was angry, but I didn't hurt Jack. I just wanted us to be together, like we were supposed to be." The room fell into a heavy silence, the only sound being the soft ticking of the wall clock. Harper leaned back, tapping his pen against the table. "Here's the thing, Amanda. We believe you're not telling us everything, and until we get the full story, we'll treat this as more than just a lover's spat." Harper and Miller exited the room, frustration etched on their faces. They knew Amanda was holding something back, but without hard evidence, their hands were tied. Harper ran a hand over his face and exhaled slowly. She's hiding something, he muttered. We just don't know what yet. Miller nodded. We need to find Jack. If he's still out there, he might be the only one who can fill in the missing pieces. Harper's phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered it, listening intently for a moment before his expression changed. You're kidding me, he said into the phone, a note of disbelief in his voice. He ended the call and turned to Miller. They found Jack's car. Miller raised an eyebrow. Where? Harper's voice was grim. Abandoned on a back road outside of town. The doors were unlocked, and there's blood on the driver's seat. Miller cursed under her breath. How bad? Not enough for a fatal injury, Harper replied, but enough to suggest someone got hurt. Miller narrowed her eyes. This just went from a missing person case to something much worse. Harper and Miller raced to the secluded road where Jack's car had been found. The sun was setting, casting an eerie glow over the scene. The car sat quietly at the edge of the road, as if it had been left in a hurry. Forensic officers were already swarming the area, documenting every detail. Harper approached the vehicle and opened the driver's door cautiously. The smell of dried blood hit him immediately. On the seat, they found a dark stain, Jack's blood. A chill settled over him. It's not a lot, but it's enough to show there was a struggle, Harper muttered to Miller, who stood beside him with a tight expression. A forensic officer approached with a small evidence bag. Inside was a cell phone, cracked but still operational. Found it wedged between the seat and the console, the officer said, handing it to Harper. Harper powered the phone on, and his heart skipped a beat. It was Jack's. There were several unread messages, all from Susan, but the last outgoing message caught Harper's attention. It was sent just after 2:30 a.m., the night Jack disappeared. The message read, I made a mistake. Meet me where it all started. Harper exchanged a look with Miller. What do you make of that? Miller furrowed her brow. Where it all started could be the reunion venue, or maybe somewhere from Jack and Amanda's past. Harper sighed. We need to dig deeper into their history. Something tells me this whole thing isn't just about an affair. It's about unfinished business from years ago. Just as they were about to close the car doors, Miller noticed something odd. Scratches on the inside of the driver's side door, as if someone had been clawing at it. She turned to Harper, her voice low. Whatever happened in this car, Jack was fighting to get out. Later that night, Harper and Miller pored over everything they had gathered so far. Phone records, financial transactions, surveillance footage, and the cryptic text message Jack sent. We need to know where that meeting place is, Harper said, tapping the message on Jack's phone. Amanda might know, Miller nodded. I'll talk to Susan again. Maybe she knows something about Jack's connection to Amanda before all of this started. Susan sat on the couch staring at her phone, scrolling through old photos from the reunion, trying to piece together the puzzle. Her head was a storm of emotions: anger, confusion, fear. Jack's disappearance had shattered the carefully constructed world she thought they had built. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized. Jack and Amanda's connection ran deeper than she had imagined. The doorbell rang, startling her out of her thoughts. It was Detective Miller. Susan let her in, her heart heavy with questions. Mrs. Carter, we need to ask you something, Miller said, her tone gentle but serious. Do you know what Jack meant by where it all started? Susan's eyes widened. He texted that to someone? Miller nodded. Just after he left the gas station. We believe it was meant for Amanda. Does it mean anything to you? Susan hesitated for a moment. Then something clicked in her mind. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Yes, I know what it means. Miller waited patiently, her eyes following Susan's movements. There was a place, an old lake house. Jack and Amanda used to go there when they were teenagers. It's just outside of town. Jack told me about it once. He said it was their special place, where everything between them began. Miller's heart raced. Do you know if that lake house still exists? Susan nodded. It does. Amanda's family still owns it. No one's been there in years, but if Jack wanted to meet her somewhere, that's the place. Miller's expression darkened. We need to check it out, right now. Miller called Harper, her voice urgent. We've got a lead. The lake house. Apparently, it's where Jack and Amanda used to meet when they were younger. We think that's where he went. Harper's voice was sharp on the other end of the line. "I'll meet you there. If Amanda's involved, we can't afford to waste time." Miller sped through the quiet streets, her thoughts racing. The pieces were starting to fit together. The lake house wasn't just a sentimental place for Jack and Amanda. It was the key to everything. As she approached the outskirts of town, she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What would they find at the lake house? Was Jack waiting for them? Or would they discover something far worse? Harper and Miller arrived at the lake house just as the sky turned a dark, ominous gray. The place looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and the wooden dock by the water sagging with age. The eerie silence around the property heightened the detectives' sense of urgency. With guns drawn, they cautiously approached the front door. Harper gave it a light push, and it creaked open. The stale smell of mildew and dust hung in the air. Inside, the furniture was covered in sheets and cobwebs lined the corners of the room. "Clear the downstairs," Harper whispered to Miller. "I'll take the upper floor." Miller nodded and moved silently through the living room, flashlight in hand. Harper climbed the creaky staircase, the wooden boards groaning beneath his weight. At the top of the stairs, Harper found a door slightly ajar. He nudged it open with his foot, revealing a small bedroom. There, lying on the bed, was Jack Carter, bruised, unconscious, but alive. "Jack!" Harper hissed, rushing to his side. He checked for a pulse and found it, though faint. Miller's voice echoed from downstairs. "Harper, you need to see this!" Leaving Jack momentarily, Harper hurried down the stairs to find Miller standing in the kitchen, pointing at something on the counter, a large roll of duct tape, a length of rope, and a small knife. But what caught Harper's attention the most was a photograph pinned to the wall above the counter. It was a picture of Jack and Amanda, taken at the reunion. Someone had scribbled the words, "Together forever," across the top in bold black marker. "This wasn't just a reunion," Miller muttered. "This was an obsession." Harper ran back upstairs and gently shook Jack awake. Jack stirred, groaning in pain, his eyes fluttering open. "Detective," he whispered hoarsely. "You're safe now," Harper said, helping him sit up. "What happened here, Jack?" Jack winced, his memory slowly returning. "It was Amanda. I tried to end things with her after the reunion. She lost it. Said if I didn't stay with her, she'd make sure Susan and everyone knew everything." "Did she do this to you?" Harper asked, his voice low. Jack nodded weakly. "She lured me here, said we could figure things out. But when I told her I couldn't leave my wife, she snapped. Tied me up, hit me." He trailed off, shivering from the memory. "She said if she couldn't have me, no one would." Harper exchanged a grim look with Miller, who stood at the doorway. "Where is she now, Jack?" Jack shook his head. "I don't know. She left hours ago. Said she'd be back to finish things." As Harper and Miller rushed Jack out of the lake house, a car's headlights appeared in the distance, illuminating the dirt road leading to the property. Harper cursed under his breath. "It's her," Miller whispered, hand on her holstered weapon. Amanda's car skidded to a halt, and she stepped out, her face twisted in rage and desperation. "You don't understand," she screamed, advancing toward them. "He belongs with me. We were supposed to be together." "Stop right there, Amanda," Harper shouted, raising his gun. "It's over. You're not going to hurt anyone else." Amanda's hands trembled as she reached into her coat pocket. Miller stepped forward, her voice firm but calm. "Amanda, don't do it. It doesn't have to end like this." Amanda hesitated for a moment, her eyes filled with anguish. But then, with a sudden, wild movement, she pulled a knife from her pocket and lunged toward Jack. Miller reacted instantly, drawing her weapon and firing a shot into Amanda's leg. Amanda crumpled to the ground, the knife clattering out of her hand. Harper rushed forward, kicking the knife away as Miller pinned Amanda to the ground and cuffed her. "It's over," Miller whispered, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. Amanda sobbed, her cries echoing through the still night air. "It was supposed to be different. We were supposed to be happy." Harper stood over her, his expression hardened. "Obsession isn't love, Amanda. It never ends well." Back at the station, Jack gave a full statement, detailing Amanda's dangerous obsession and how it spiraled out of control. With his testimony and the physical evidence from the lake house, Amanda was charged with kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. Jack, though battered and shaken, was given a second chance, one he knew he didn't deserve. He returned home to Susan, hoping to salvage what was left of their broken marriage. But Susan knew too much, had seen too clearly what had transpired. "You made your choice the moment you lied to me," she whispered, standing at the door as Jack begged for forgiveness. "And now I'm making mine." She closed the door, leaving Jack standing on the porch, the weight of his mistakes crashing down on him. Detectives Harper and Miller wrapped up the case, filing the final reports with a sense of quiet satisfaction. As they left the station, Harper turned to Miller. "Obsession, betrayal, and a little nostalgia," Harper mused. "It's a dangerous combination." Miller nodded. "And some people never learn to let go of the past." The night was calm again, but Harper knew that cases like this left scars, not just on the victims, but on everyone involved. The reunion that was supposed to revive old memories had instead shattered lives, leaving nothing but heartache in its wake. As they walked toward their cars, Harper glanced back at the station, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the hardest thing to do is move on." In the end, the truth came to light, but at a devastating cost. Jack's affair, fueled by nostalgia and manipulation, unraveled more than just his marriage. It exposed the dangers of unresolved pasts and unchecked obsessions. Amanda's desperate desire to rekindle what was lost drove her to violence, proving that some memories are better left in the past. Jack returned home, but the damage was irreparable. Susan, now faced with betrayal and broken trust, chose to walk away. In the quiet aftermath, one thing was clear: the past can haunt, but it's the choices we make in the present that define our future. What do you think? Should Susan have forgiven Jack, or was walking away the right choice? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another gripping true crime tale.